If you're listening late at night, you might want to stay until the end. Something happened to me, and to this day, I can't understand it. My name is Rodrigo Vasconcelos. I am 42 years old and have been a commercial pilot for 18 years. I have flown in almost every imaginable condition: storms, mechanical failures, onboard medical emergencies. I have always remained calm. I have always trusted the instruments. I have always believed that if you follow the protocols, everything works out. Until that night. It was a cargo flight, Dallas to Anchorage. No passengers, just me, my co-pilot, a young guy named Ben, and tons of sealed electronic equipment in the back. We took off at 11:15 p.m., clear skies, full moon, stable temperature. Everything as expected. Ben fell asleep soon after we reached cruising altitude. He always did that on night flights. I don't mind. In fact, I prefer the silence. After the divorce, I learned to enjoy solitude. The empty cabin, the constant hum of the engines, the illuminated panel in front of me like an altar of blue and green lights. I was flying over the middle of nowhere, Montana, I think, when I saw it. One point on the radar, small, clear, moving parallel to my path. I frowned. I checked the altitude, 35,000 feet. The point was at the same time, same speed, same direction. I found it strange, but not alarming. Sometimes phantom signals appear. Interference. Atmospheric reflections. I'd seen this before, but this one wouldn't disappear. I kept watching. 5 minutes. 10 minutes. The spot remained there, like a shadow clinging to the side of the plane, always at the same distance, about 2 miles to my right. I picked up the radio. Center, this is cargo flight 947. I'm detecting unidentified traffic on my radar. Can you confirm? The voice from the tower returned, calm, almost bored. Negative, 947. We have no record of traffic in your area. Clear skies. I looked at the radar again. The point was still there. Center, I visually confirm on my panel. Object maintaining formation at 2 miles, same altitude. Break. Flight 947, check your instruments. There is nothing registered here. I felt something strange creep up my spine. It wasn't fear, not yet. It was discomfort. The feeling that something wasn't right. I looked at Ben. He was snoring softly, his head resting on the side of the chair. I turned my eyes back to the radar. The point remained there, faithful, constant, as if he were waiting for me. I decided to test it. I turned the control stick slightly to the left. Just 2 degrees, a subtle course correction, nothing that warranted an alert. The plane responded smoothly, banking in the darkness. I looked at the radar. The point adjusted accordingly, not immediately, but within seconds, he repositioned himself, maintaining exactly the same distance, as if he had followed along. My heart raced. I turned right now. 3 degrees, more abrupt. The point waited, and then it moved again. Precisely. Deliberately. What the hell? I muttered. Ben stirred beside me, his eyes still closed. I thought about waking him, but hesitated. What was I going to say? That there was a ghost on the radar. I picked up the radio again, trying to keep my voice steady. Center, Flight 947. I'm making route adjustments and the contact is still present. He is moving with me. Silence on the other end. Then, the same voice, now with a hint of impatience. 947, we detected no traffic. I repeat, clear skies. If you are experiencing technical problems, I suggest checking your systems. Technical problems. That's what they thought. That my radar was malfunctioning. But I knew it wasn't. Understood. Center. I'll monitor it. I turned off the radio and just stood there, staring at that damn green dot on the dashboard. That's when I heard a low noise, almost imperceptible, like static, coming from the radio, even though it's turned off. I instinctively turned up the volume. The static grew, and within it, something else, a pattern, a rhythm, as if someone were trying to speak, but the voice was distorted, drowned. I felt a chill run up my arms. Ben. Nothing. Ben! He woke up with a start, blinking rapidly. What it was? I pointed to the radar. Look at this. He leaned over, still sleepy, and looked at the dashboard. It took him a few seconds to realize, there's something there. Try. Is the tower alive? No, they say there's nothing there. He looked at me, and then back at the radar. I saw the fear growing in his eyes. That kind of silent fear, the kind that doesn't scream, but settles in slowly. This isn't normal, he said, his voice high-pitched. I know. We remained silent, only the hum of the engines, and the static, always the static. Ben reached out hesitantly and touched the panel, as if he could make the dot disappear. It didn't disappear. Rodrigo, what do we do? I didn't answer, because I didn't know. Then the cold arrived. It wasn't gradual. It was instantaneous, as if someone had opened a door to the vacuum. The temperature inside the cabin plummeted. I saw my breath become visible. I saw Ben shrug, trembling. What the hell? I checked the air conditioning systems. Everything is normal. Internal temperature, 22 degrees Celsius, according to the panel. But I was freezing. And what about the location on the radar? It was still there. Closer now. We need to go downstairs. Ben's voice was trembling. He rubbed his hands, trying to warm himself, but the cold wouldn't let up. It was the wrong kind of cold. A cold that came from within. We can't go down without authorization, I replied, but my voice sounded hollow, too formal, as if I were reciting a manual while the world was crumbling. Rodrigo, look at the radar. I looked. The spot was closer, now less than a mile away. And it wasn't just a spot anymore. It was a blur, something diffuse, as if it were spreading. My fingers gripped the joystick. I'm going upstairs. What? I'm going to climb 1,000 feet. Let's see if he can keep up. I pushed the control stick gently. The plane began to gain altitude. 36,000 feet, 36,500, 37,000. I looked at the radar. The stain moved up along with it, perfectly synchronized. Holy shit, Ben whispered. My chest tightened. It wasn't fear yet. It was something worse. It was the feeling of being watched, of being tracked, like a marked animal. Try to go down, Ben said, his voice hoarse. I didn't want to, but I did it. I descended 2,000 feet, quickly, more than I should have, without alerting the tower. The stain went down along with it, and then it happened. The instruments flashed. All the lights on the dashboard, altimeter, speedometer, artificial horizon, compass, all went out for a second. A whole second of total darkness. Ben shouted, "Rodrigo!" The lights came back on, but something had changed. The static on the radio was louder now. It wasn't just noise anymore. It was almost a voice. Deep, distant, like someone speaking underwater. "Turn that off," Ben shouted, covering his ears. I turned off the radio by force. The sound continued. It wasn't coming from the radio. It was coming from everywhere. From the walls, from the panel, from the air. I looked out the window. The night outside was dense. No stars, no moon. As if we had entered a bubble of absolute darkness, and then the dot on the radar disappeared. It simply disappeared. Ben and I exchanged glances. He was pale, sweating, despite the cold. "It disappeared," he said, almost in disbelief. "It disappeared," I repeated. For a moment, I felt relief. A brief, foolish relief, because it was at that moment that I saw it. Something passed in front of the plane. It wasn't quick. It wasn't a blur. It was slow, deliberate. One way. I can't quite describe it. It wasn't solid. It wasn't light. It was an absence. As if a piece of the sky had been ripped away and something was moving inside that void. It had no wings. It had no engines. It had nothing that made sense. And there it was, right in front of me, less than 100 meters away. My fingers froze on the joystick. "Ben, are you seeing this?" He didn't answer. I looked to the side. Ben was paralyzed. His eyes fixed on the window, his mouth slightly open. Tears streamed down his face. "Ben?" Nothing. The shape continued moving. It crossed slowly from left to right, and then it disappeared, not backward, not downward. It simply ceased to exist. The call disappeared all at once. The static stopped. The instruments returned to normal. We stood there in absolute silence, only the roar of the engines filling the void. After a while, I don't know how long, Ben finally spoke, his voice breaking. "We're not going to tell anyone." I knew he was right, because who would believe it? I should have landed immediately. I should have declared an emergency. I should have done anything but continue flying as if nothing had happened. But I continued. Ben was silent. He didn't take his eyes off the window. He didn't blink. He just stared into the darkness outside, as if expecting it to return. I tried to focus on the instruments. Stable altitude, constant speed, normal fuel level. Everything working as it should. But my hands were trembling on the control stick. "Rodrigo." Ben's voice was a whisper. "No." "Rodrigo, look." I said no. "Look out the window." I didn't want to. Every fiber of my being screamed at me not to look, to keep flying, to pretend nothing was happening. But I looked, and there it was again. Not in front, not crossing. I was right beside them, keeping up, maintaining the same speed, the same altitude. It was bigger now, or closer. I don't know. The shape still didn't make sense. It was like looking at something your brain refused to process. A silhouette that changed, that folded, that existed and didn't exist at the same time. And it had light. No, it wasn't light. It was the opposite of light. It was as if the thing was sucking up all the light around it, creating a black hole in reality. "What is that?" Ben asked, his voice faltering. "I don't know." "He is following us. I know." My heart was beating so hard I could feel it in my temples, in my throat, in my chest. And then the thing moved. Closer, not gradually. It was instantaneous, as if he had jumped from one place to another without crossing the space between them. Now it was less than 50 meters away. I could see details, or what my brain interpreted as details. Something that looked like structure, something that looked like texture, like liquid metal, like translucent skin, like broken glass endlessly rearranging itself. And it had eyes. No, they weren't eyes, but they were watching me. I felt it. I felt the weight of that gaze. I felt that it knew exactly who I was, where I was, what I was thinking. "Rodrigo, do something!" Ben shouted. I couldn't move. The thing tilted. It didn't have a head, but it tilted, as if it were curious, as if it were studying the airplane. And then he did the impossible. It accelerated. It ran right over us. Not to the side. Not behind. Over. I saw the shadow, that absence of light, slide across the cockpit, covering the glass, blocking everything, as if we had stepped inside it. The panel went blank again. All the engines failed at the same time. The silence was deafening. There was no more buzzing. There was nothing left, just a fall. Rodrigo. I pulled the control stick all the way. Nothing. I tried restarting the engines. Nothing. The systems were dead. We were falling. Ben was praying, or crying, or both. I looked out the window. The thing was still there, above us, watching our fall. And then she stopped. She hung suspended in mid-air, observing, and the engines started again, all at once. As if someone had pressed a button. I regained control. I stabilized the plane. I leveled the altitude. I looked outside. The thing was fading, not disappearing, vanishing, dissolving into the darkness, like smoke. And then there was nothing left, just empty sky. Ben vomited in his own lap. I couldn't let go of the joystick. My fingers were white from the force. "We don't talk about that," I said. My voice was dead, with no one, ever. Ben nodded, trembling, and we continue flying. In silence, all the way to Anchorage. We landed in Anchorage at 4:37 a.m. The sun had not yet risen. The hangar was empty. Only a few mechanics were in the back, tinkering with equipment, oblivious to everything. I turned off the engines. I took off my headset. I sat there, staring at the blank dashboard. Ben left the cabin without saying a word. I heard the door close behind him. I heard his footsteps fading away along the metal walkway. I was left alone. It took me 15 minutes to be able to move. My legs trembled when I stepped on the ground. The cold Alaskan air hit me like a slap. But it was welcome. It was real. It was concrete. I found Ben outside, leaning against the side of the plane. He was smoking. I didn't know he smoked. "Are you going to tell?" he asked, without looking at me. "No. Not even for the company." "No." He took a long drag, his hands still trembling. "Me either." We remained silent. The wind howled between the hangars. In the distance, a plane took off, its lights flashing in the darkness. "What do you think that was?" Ben asked, his voice low. "I don't know." "Do you think that it was real?" I looked at him. His eyes were red, sunken. He looked 10 years older. "Yes," I replied. "It was real." He threw the cigarette on the ground and stomped on it. "I'm going to request a transfer. Daytime flights. Domestic flights. Something different." "I understand." "I agree." "Take care, Rodrigo." "You too." He left. We never spoke about that night again. I flew again 3 days later, Dallas to Seattle. Another overnight flight, another cargo. I needed to prove to myself that it had been a delusion, a hallucination, sleep deprivation, some kind of gas leak in the cabin, anything. But when I reached cruising altitude and looked at the radar, I was there. The point, same position, same distance, as if he had been waiting for me. My breath caught in my throat. I called the tower. I asked about traffic. "Clear skies," they said. I looked at the co-pilot next to me, a new woman, her first trip with me. "Are you seeing anything on the radar?" I asked, trying to sound casual. She looked, "No." "Why?" She couldn't see, just me. I tried to convince myself it was paranoia, that my brain was creating patterns where there were none, that the trauma of that night had left scars, but the dot wouldn't disappear. And as the days passed, 10 flights, 15 flights, 20, he kept showing up, always in the same place, always at the same distance, never getting closer, never moving away, just observing. I stopped calling the tower. I stopped asking the co-pilots. I learned to live with it, to ignore it. But sometimes, on the quietest flights, when I'm alone in the cabin and the night stretches endlessly outside, I look out the window, and I swear I see something moving in the darkness, something that stays with me, something that knows my name. I still fly. I still work. Nobody knows what happened that night. My license is intact. My medical exams are normal. But I've changed. Every time I climb, every time I cross that threshold between the ground and the sky, I know I'm not alone. And the worst part? I don't think I've ever been there. I think it was always there. It was always up there, in that void between the earth and space, waiting. And that night, he simply decided to show himself. Something happened to me, and to this day I can't understand it. My name is Sophia. I've worked as a flight attendant for 8 years. International flights, long routes, overnight flights across the Atlantic. I've seen it all. Drunk passengers, turbulence that made the cabin shake, medical emergencies at 35,000 feet. I learned to stay calm. I learned to smile even when fear grips me. But what happened that night? No training could have prepared me for it. It was a night flight. Departing at 11:40 p.m. from New York, destination London. A common route. An aircraft I knew by heart. An Airbus A330, old configuration, wooden lights that never worked properly. The kind of plane that creaks in the wrong places and has that smell of recycled air mixed with cleaning products. But what bothered me from the start was the emptiness. 23 passengers. Just 23. On a plane with a capacity of 250. I checked the manifest 3 times before takeoff. A few executives returning home, an elderly couple, 2 women traveling alone, and a few tired faces scattered around the cabin. Nothing strange, nothing wrong, but there was something in the air, too quiet. You know that natural murmur of a flight, even an empty one. People adjusting their bags, talking quietly, cell phones beeping before being turned off. There was none of that. Everyone was already seated when I boarded, quiet, motionless, as if they were waiting. I tried to ignore it. Exhaustion, I told myself. It had been almost 6 months without a decent break. My relationship had ended 3 weeks earlier. I was just worn out. That's all. The takeoff was smooth. JFK disappeared beneath the clouds, and in a few minutes, we were over the ocean. The cabin plunged into that characteristic bluish twilight of night flights. Reading lights off, only the aisle illuminated by those faint stripes on the floor. I went to the galley to prepare the service. Coffee, water, some sandwiches for those who asked. My colleague, Amanda, was checking the carts. She was new, nervous, the type who talks too much when she's stressed. "Dead flight, huh?" she said, forcing a smile. "That's better," I replied. "Less work." But when I looked down the hallway, I felt that tightness in my chest again. Everyone remained in the same position. No one was sleeping. No one was using their cell phone. No one was adjusting themselves in their seat, just sitting, looking ahead or down the hallway. One of them, in seat 12F5, was facing me. Not entirely, just enough for me to feel like he was watching me. I swallowed hard. I picked up the tray with the glasses of water and started handing them out. Row by row, I walked slowly, offering, smiling, repeating the same automatic phrases I had already said 1,000 times. But no one answered. Nobody caught anything. They just stared at me, in silence. And when I got to row 12, seat F was empty. I stopped in the aisle. I looked at seat 12F. Empty. But I had seen someone there. I'm absolutely sure. A man, dark shirt, pale face, looking at me. I shook my head. Tiredness. It could only be tiredness. I continued working. But something was wrong. I knew it. Every time I passed a row, I felt that chill creeping up my neck. That feeling of being watched from all sides. I went back to the galley and picked up the passenger manifest. 23 passengers, 23 names, 23 seats listed. I checked line by line, comparing it to the cabin map. Everything matched up. But when I looked down the hallway again, I counted the silhouettes seated there. 28. My stomach turned to ice. I counted again, slowly, row by row. 28 people. I looked at the paper in my hand. 23. Amanda. I called, trying to keep my voice steady. Did you check how many passengers boarded? She was putting away the toy cars, distracted. 23. It's in the manifesto. Did you tell him? You don't need to tell me, Sophia. It's all recorded in the system. She didn't understand. She didn't see what I was seeing. I took a deep breath. I picked up the manifesto and walked down the aisle again. This time, slowly, checking each occupied seat against the list. Row 7, 2 passengers. They were on the list. Row 9, 1 passenger, it stated. Row 12, 3 passengers. Wait, 3. I stopped. Row 12 had 3 people seated. Window, middle, aisle. But on the manifest, only seat 12A was registered. An elderly woman, Mrs. Patterson. I looked at the row. Mrs. Patterson was by the window, asleep, or at least she appeared to be. But next to her, in the middle seat, was a man in a gray suit, and down the aisle, a young woman with black hair. They weren't on the list. I approached slowly. "Excuse me," I said, in the most professional tone I could muster. "May I see your boarding passes?" Silence. The man in the suit didn't move. The dark-haired woman continued staring straight ahead, her hands resting in her lap, her posture rigid and artificial. "Sir?" I insisted. Nothing. I reached out my hand, almost touching his shoulder, and then I felt it. Cold. Not the cold of air conditioning. A different kind of cold. Dense. As if the air around those seats were made of invisible ice. My breath came out in mist, collected. The woman with black hair turned her face, slowly, very slowly. She didn't blink. His eyes were fixed on me, empty, expressionless, lifeless. I stumbled away, almost tripping over the cart. "Sophia?" Amanda appeared behind me. "Is everything all right?" "Do you see those people?" I asked, discreetly pointing to row 12. She looked. "Is the lady asleep?" "Yes. That's Patterson, seat 12A, and the other 2. Amanda frowned. "Which other 2? My blood froze. "Amanda, there are 2 people sitting next to her." She looked again and smiled. That smile of someone who thinks you're joking. "Sophia, you're the only one there. You need to sleep." She went back to the galley. I stood there in the hallway, looking at the man in the gray suit, and for the woman with black hair. They were still there, staring at me. I locked myself in the crew bathroom. My hands were trembling. My breathing was erratic. I turned on the tap and splashed cold water on my face. I looked in the mirror. Deep, dark circles under my eyes. Pale skin. I was exhausted. Maybe Amanda was right. Maybe I just needed sleep. But I saw it. I saw those people. I took 3 deep breaths. I counted to 10. A technique I learned in a stress management training course. It worked for panicked passengers. It had to work for me. I left the bathroom. The hallway was empty. Lights flickered once, twice, then they went back to normal. I walked to the pilot's in-cabin and used the intercom. "Commander Harris." "It's Sophia." A few seconds of static. "Damn, Sophia. I need to confirm the exact number of passengers on board. Break, 23. Why? I think there's a discrepancy. Discrepancy." My voice cracked. "I count more people than are recorded." Silence on the other end. Then, his voice, more serious. "Sophia, are you okay? Do you want me to ask Amanda to take over?" "No, I just need to be sure. The system confirms 23. Double check and let me know if you need anything." The line was cut. I gripped the intercom tightly. He didn't believe me. Of course not. Why would he? I went back to the hallway, and they were still there. Now it wasn't just the 2 from row 12. There was more. Row 18, a man in a leather jacket, alone. He was not on the list. Row 23. 2 children, side by side, holding hands. No children boarded this flight. Row 34. A woman in a white dress, long hair covering her face. I counted again. 34 passengers. But the manifesto said 23, and no one else could see it. I walked slowly, trying not to look directly at them. But I felt it. I felt all those gazes fixed on me. Cold, heavy, as if each pair of eyes were an icy hand resting on my skin. I arrived at the galley. Amanda was having coffee, looking at her phone. "Amanda, can you do a patrol with me?" "Now," she sighed. "Again?" "Sophia, you're acting strange today. Please." She dropped her phone and followed me. We walked together down the aisle. I was in front, she was behind. I discreetly pointed to row 18. "Is someone sitting there?" She looked. "No, it's empty." I looked. The man in the leather jacket was still there, motionless, staring at me. "And over there?" I pointed to the children in row 23, empty too. My heart raced. I turned to Amanda. "Can't you see anyone in those seats?" She crossed her arms, now worried. "Sophia, there's no one here. Seriously, do you want me to call the commander?" No, everything's fine." But it wasn't. Amanda went back to the galley. I stayed standing in the hallway. And then it happened. The man in row 12, the one in the gray suit, stood up, slowly. He stood in the hallway, facing me. It wasn't moving. It wasn't breathing. It was just there. I took a step back. He took a step forward. "Sit down," I said, my voice weak and trembling. He disobeyed. Another step. I received it. He moved forward. And then, for the first time, he opened his mouth. Not to talk, something to smile about. A wide smile, unnatural, without blinking, without moving anything but the lips. I screamed, "Run!" I ran down the corridor, past the rows, past the others, the living and those who shouldn't have been there. I arrived at the galley. Amanda wasn't there. Nobody was there. The entire cabin was empty. Just me and them. I looked back. The hallway was crowded. Everyone stand up now. Everyone is looking at me, and everyone was smiling. I leaned against the galley wall, my legs trembling, my heart pounding so hard it hurt. The corridor was full of people standing still, motionless, all turned towards me. Their faces, God, their faces, too pale, eyes too deep set, crooked, frozen smiles, as if someone had carved that into their flesh and forgotten to give life to the rest. I picked up the intercom with trembling hands. "Commander! Commander Harris, for God's sake, answer me!" Static. "Commander." Nothing. I dropped the intercom. I looked at the cockpit door. Locked. Always locked during flight. Safety protocol. But I had the code. I could get in. I took a deep breath. I looked down the hallway. They were still there. Standing still. But now, closer. I didn't see anyone move. But they were closer than before. I left the galley, forcing my legs to work. I walked past them. The smell was unbearable. Stagnant, metallic air, like old blood mixed with kerosene. The temperature plummeted. My breath came out in clouds of vapor. I didn't look to the sides. I didn't look at them. I just walked, one foot in front of the other. Right up to the cabin door. I typed in the code. My hands were shaking so much that I made 2 mistakes. On the 3rd try, the light turned green. I pushed the door open, locked from the inside. "Commander!" I knocked on the door. "Open the door!" Silence. And then, behind me, a voice. Low, hoarse, whispered, "Flight 447. I froze it. I turned around slowly. The woman with black hair was less than a meter away from me, so close that I could see every detail of her face, the gray skin, the dark veins beneath the surface, the cracked lips, the lifeless eyes. She repeated, louder, "Flight 447. My blood ran cold. Flight 447. I knew that number. Everyone in aviation knew it. An Airbus A330. Route Rio de Janeiro, Paris, crashed in the middle of the Atlantic, June 2009. 228 dead. Debris took days to be found. Bodies missing in the ocean. No, I whispered. No, this isn't real. She tilted her head, slowly, like a bird studying its prey. You know where we are? No, you always knew. The lights flickered. Once, twice, 3 times. In the darkness between the blinks, they moved. When the lights came back on, they were all around me, forming a circle, too close. No breath, empty eyes fixed on me. The man in the gray suit was in front of me now. He crouched down. His face was at mine, and he whispered, "We never land." "Stop!" I yelled. "Get away from me!" The aircraft shook, violently. Turbulence. No, it wasn't turbulence. It was quiet. The nose of the plane dove downward. Objects flew, trays, cups, suitcases. My body was thrown against the wall. Alarms blared. Red lights flooded the cabin, and they remained standing there. Real estate. Even as the plane plummeted, they didn't move. They just watched me. The commander's voice rang out from the sound system, distorted and faltering. Perdendo altitude, Mayday, Mayday. I crawled across the floor, clinging to the seats. The pressure shifted. My ears popped. The oxygen thinned. Masks fell from the ceiling, swaying, useless. The woman with black hair crouched down beside me. Her face was inches from mine. "You were already with us," she said, "from the very beginning." No, the impact. Cold. Darkness. Water. Everything stopped. I woke up in the hospital. White lights. Smell of disinfectant. Rhythmic beeps from a heart monitor. Rough sheets against my skin. Dry, scratchy throat. A nurse came in when I tried to sit down. "Calm down. Calm down. You had a breakdown. You need to rest." The flight. My voice came out cracked. "But what happened to the flight?" She frowned, confused. "The flight landed normally in London. You fainted during the service. The paramedics attended to you as soon as we landed." No, the plane crashed. I felt it. We fell. "Sophia, you seem confused. The flight went perfectly. No incidents." I shook my head. It couldn't be. I felt the impact. I felt the fall. I felt the water. The passengers. There were passengers who weren't on the list. 34. I counted them. The nurse exchanged a glance with someone out of my field of vision. A doctor entered, stethoscope hanging around his neck, a careful expression on his face. "Sophia, you were under extreme stress, sleep deprivation, accumulated fatigue. Your body collapsed. What you saw were hallucinations caused by exhaustion." I wasn't hallucinating, I whispered, but the doubt was already there, planted, growing. 3 days passed. Tests, questions. Psychologists, all with the same diagnosis. Severe burnout, temporary psychotic episode, recommendation for time off. The airline was kind. 90 days of medical leave, paid psychological support. No blame assigned, just care, rest, recovery. They sent me home, my apartment in Queens. 3rd floor, window overlooking the street. Everything exactly as I had left it before the flight. I sat on the bed. I looked at the uniform hanging in the closet. Navy blue, immaculate, ready for the next flight I never wanted to take again. I reached into my jacket pockets, searching for my cell phone, and I found something. A piece of paper. I took it off slowly. It was a boarding pass. Old, yellowed at the edges. Printed in an old format, the kind that is no longer used. I read the information. VU AF 447. Route Rio de Janeiro, Paris. Date June 1st, 2009. Seat 12D. My stomach churned. That was the seat of the man in the gray suit, the man who whispered to me, who smiled, who told me we never landed. I dropped the card as if it were burning. It fell to the floor, spinning, landing face up. It wasn't possible. I'd never seen anything like it before. I'd never played on that flight. Not in 2009. I was still in college. I got up and went to the window, trying to breathe, trying to think. The street was empty. Dawn. Streetlights illuminating the sidewalk. Silence. Except for one figure, stopped in front of my building. A man in a gray suit, property, looking up, looking directly out my window. I didn't blink, I didn't breathe. He didn't move. He just stood there, still, just like he was on the plane. I closed the curtain tightly. I locked the windows, all the doors. I turned on all the lights in the apartment. I sat on the living room floor, hugging my knees, trying not to think, not to remember. But the voice kept echoing in my head. You were already with us, from the very beginning. And then I realized, I picked up my cell phone. I looked up the flight number I had worked for that night. The flight from New York to London, BA 447, not AF 447. BA 447, British Airways, not Air France, but the number was the same, 447. I closed my eyes. Tears streamed down my face. They chose me, or I chose them, or I was always there with them, in that ocean, on that flight that never landed. I don't know anymore, but one thing I know, they are still here. And every night, when I look out the window, there's always someone standing in the street, waiting. And I promised I'd never tell. But this secret is destroying me. My name doesn't matter. What matters is that I've been a commercial co-pilot for 5 years. I've flown over 1,000 hours. I know every sound, every vibration, every protocol. I was trained to stay calm when everything around me is falling apart. But what happened that night? No operating manual could have prepared me for it. It was a night flight from Newark to Los Angeles. Routine. 6 hours crossing the United States while the entire country slept below. We took off at 11:47 p.m. local time. Clear skies, no turbulence predicted, just stars and endless darkness outside the windows. I like the night shift. There's something honest about the solitude of those hours. The captain was a veteran named Harris, 50-something, gray hair, a man of few words. We didn't talk much. There was no need. The cockpit had its own language, the constant hum of the engines, the occasional beep of the instruments, the soft crackling of the radio on standby. We reached cruising altitude at 2034, 37,000 feet. Autopilot engaged. Harris yawned, adjusted his seat, and said he was going to rest his eyes for about 20 minutes. I was left alone, looking at the illuminated panel in front of me, feeling that strange peace that only exists when you are suspended between the ground and space. Outside, only darkness, no city in sight, no light, just emptiness. That's when I heard the voice for the first time. She came on the radio, clear and professional, with that neutral tone we use for routine broadcasts. United 227, this is air traffic control, cleared for altitude change. Descend to flight level 350, confirm. I didn't hesitate. The voice used our correct caller ID. The procedure was perfect. I picked up the microphone and replied, Center, this is United 227, confirming descent to 350. I adjusted the panel, programmed the new altitude into the autopilot. Everything normal, all protocol in place. But then, something bothered me. The frequency, I looked at the radio display. We were tuned to 132.45 megahertz, the correct sector frequency. But that voice, it had a strange quality, very close, very clear, as if it were being transmitted from inside the cabin, not from a tower hundreds of kilometers away. I pressed the transmit button again. Center. Confirm last instruction. United 227 waiting. Silence. 5 seconds, 10, 15. Then another voice answered, but it wasn't the same one. United 227, this is Denver Center. We are not transmitting any instructions. Maintain your current altitude. I repeat, maintain flight level 370. My stomach turned to ice. Denver, I just received clearance to land. No, United 227, no transmission was sent from here. Are you all right there? I looked at Harris. He was still asleep, his breathing slow and heavy. Yes, I am. I'm fine. I canceled the descent. I reconfigured the autopilot. My heart was beating faster now, and then the first voice returned. Closer, more impatient. United 227. I told you to get off. My hand froze on the microphone. The voice had returned. But now, there was something different about it. The professional tone was still there, but beneath it, an irritation, an impatience that made no sense. Air traffic controllers don't get impatient. They're trained to remain absolutely calm, no matter what happens. But that voice, it sounded offended that I hadn't obeyed. I checked the frequency again, 132.45 megahertz, correct. Everything indicated that I was talking to Denver Center. But I had just heard Denver tell me that they hadn't transmitted anything. I pressed the button. Identify yourself. Who is transmitting on this frequency? Silence. I counted 10 seconds, 15, 20. United 227, you have received clear instructions. Flight level 350, immediate descent. The voice was louder now, not in volume, but in proximity, as if whoever was speaking had moved closer to the microphone, or to me. I felt a shiver run down the back of my neck. Denver Center, please confirm that this transmission is coming from you. The answer came almost instantly, but it was the other voice, the real one. United 227, our frequency is clear. We are not hearing any other transmissions besides yours. Please check your equipment. This didn't make sense. I was hearing two different voices on the same frequency. One of them was Denver, the other. I looked at the radio panel as if it could give me an answer. The green lights were flashing normally. No warnings. No system failures. Harris. My voice came out lower than I intended. Harris, wake up. He grumbled, adjusted his head, but didn't wake up. And then, the voice said something that made my blood run cold. Co-pilot Mendez. I'm not going to repeat myself. My name. She said my name. No one uses names in transmissions. It's always flight code, position, instruction. Never names. Never. I felt my breath quicken. My chest tightened. I looked around the cabin, at the dark windows, at Harris sleeping, at the instruments glowing in front of me. Who are you? The question came out as a whisper. No response. I changed frequencies. I tuned to 121.5, the international emergency frequency. If there was interference, I needed to report it. I needed help. Mayday, Mayday, this is United 227. I am receiving unidentified transmissions on an active frequency. I request. You don't need help, co-pilot Mendez. The voice had followed me. It was on the emergency frequency as well. Impossible. Completely impossible. I went back to 132.45. My finger trembled on the radio controls. Harris, I shouted this time. Harris! He woke up suddenly, confused, blinking at the dashboard light. What happened? What's going on? Someone is broadcasting on our frequency, using my name, giving false instructions. Harris frowned, still trying to fully wake up. He picked up his headphones, adjusted them, and listened. I can't hear anything. What do you mean you don't? Only you can hear me. Co-pilot Mendez. Only you. My heart raced. Didn't you hear that? Listen to what? Harris looked at me with genuine concern now. Lucas, are you okay? You look pale. I was about to reply when I noticed the autopilot. The altitude was changing. On the display, the numbers slowly decreased. 36,800, 36,600, 36,400. I wasn't in control of that. It wasn't Harris. Disengage the autopilot, I yelled. Harris looked at the panel, saw the descent, and his expression changed instantly. He pulled the control stick, pressed the disengagement button. Nothing. Don't answer. His voice was tense now. The first time I'd heard fear there. 36,000 feet, 35,800. The engines adjusted their power output on their own. The plane was obeying an order that none of us had given. And then the voice returned, now in an almost satisfied tone. Good boy. Harris hammered the controls with experienced fingers, trying every combination he knew. Manually disengage. Reset the system. Cut the autopilot power. Nothing worked. 35,400 feet. 35,200. The plane continued its descent, smooth and obedient, as if someone invisible were sitting between us, calmly controlling everything. That's not possible. Harris's voice was tense, controlled, but I could feel the panic rising beneath. The systems have redundancies, blockages. You can't just take control like that. But someone had taken over, or something. I pulled out the emergency procedures manual, but my hands were shaking so much that the blurred pages blended together. My entire training screamed to follow protocol, to keep a cool head, to trust the instruments. But what happens when the instruments obey someone else? Try contacting us again, Harris ordered. Any tower, any frequency, let them know we've lost control. I turned the dial, changing frequencies rapidly. 127.80, 128.50, 129.25. This is United 227. We've lost altitude control. We're on an unauthorized descent. Can anyone hear me? Static. I moved again. United 227 calling. We have an emergency on board. We need immediate assistance. More static. And then, on all the frequencies I was trying, the same voice. There's no one who can help you right now. Co-pilot Mendez. 34,500 feet. I looked out the window. Down there, in the absolute emptiness, I imagined seeing a faint glow, lights from some distant city, perhaps. Or maybe it was just my eyes desperately searching for something concrete, something real. Harris, do you know anyone who could hack a plane in mid-flight? He glanced at me quickly, and for a second I saw the same terror I felt. Theoretically, maybe. But it would require access to ground systems, satellites, an absurd amount of technical knowledge. His voice trailed off. He didn't believe what he was saying. No, it's impossible. But it was happening. That's when I felt it. Cold. Not the normal cold of the cabin's air conditioning. This was different. It came from within, as if my bones had turned to ice. My breath began to come out in vapor. I could see the white mist forming in front of my face. Are you feeling this? I asked, my voice faltering. Harris looked at me, then at his own breath. Vapor, too. The temperature. He checked the ambient display. 22 degrees. It's showing normal. But it wasn't normal. I could see my breathing. I felt my body trembling. My skin was covered in goosebumps under my uniform. And then, I heard it. Not by radio. One breath. Slow, deep, rhythmic. It was coming from behind me, from the crew rest area, behind the dark curtains. I turned my head slowly. The curtains were closed, swaying slightly in the air conditioning. But there was no one there. It had just been the two of us in the cabin that night. No one else. Harris, there's someone behind the curtains. He looked where I was pointing, tense. There's no one here. It's just the two of us. I can hear someone breathing. Harris unbuckled his belt, stood up, and took 2 steps toward the curtain. His hand hesitated for a second before pulling the fabric aside. Empty. Just the small folding seat and a forgotten blanket. But breathing continued, closer now. As if whoever was breathing had moved, right beside me. I turned my head slowly to the left, toward the empty captain's seat, where Harris had been sitting seconds before. Nothing. But I could feel it. A presence. Heavy. Watchful. As real as the panel in front of me. "You're starting to understand," co-pilot Mendez. The voice didn't come from the radio this time. It came from inside the cabin. From the empty seat next to me. The air suddenly left my lungs. Harris was still standing, looking at me with growing concern. But he hadn't heard. I saw it in his eyes. He hadn't heard the voice coming from inside the cabin, just me. "Oh, Lucas, you're scaring me. What is it?" I couldn't answer. My throat had closed up. I looked at the empty seat next to me, that seat that should have been occupied only by leather and metal, but which now felt heavy, occupied. The breathing continued, slow, steady, like someone waiting patiently for something. "Sit down," I managed to say. "Please, sit down again." Harris returned to his seat, but kept his eyes on me. "Can you see anything?" I wasn't seeing it, but I was feeling it. A presence so solid that the air beside me felt thicker, as if someone were leaning over me, watching my every move, my every breath. I could feel the weight of a gaze, not from Harris, but from something positioned in the space between us. 33,800 feet. The plane continued its descent. "Try manual control again." My voice came out hoarse. "Ignore the autopilot. Take control manually." Harris gripped the control stick and pulled. The muscles in his arm tensed with the effort, but the plane didn't respond. It continued its smooth, impassive descent, obeying only a voice that none of us had the authority to question. That's when I noticed the reflection. In the dark glass of the window to my left, illuminated only by the green and blue instruments on the dashboard, I could see the cabin reflected. You could see me. You could see Harris. And there was a third silhouette, sitting between us. My heart pounded in my chest. I turned my head. Nothing. Just the empty space of the central corridor. I looked at my reflection again. There it was. A dark, undefined shape. Broad shoulders. Head slightly tilted, as if it were looking at me. "Harris, look at your reflection. In the window. Look." He turned and looked at the glass. His face instantly paled. "What? What is that?" So he was seeing it too. It wasn't just in my head. The silhouette in the reflection moved, turning its head slowly, as if alternating its attention between the two of us. But when we looked directly at the space where it should have been, nothing. Just emptiness. She only existed in the reflection. "You guys are doing great." The voice filled the cabin now, no longer coming from a specific point, but from all directions at once. From the walls. From the ceiling. From the very air we breathed. Harris put his hand to his chest, breathing heavily. "No, this isn't happening. This can't be happening." But it was. 32,900 feet. The instruments began to flash. Not erratically, but sequentially. As if someone were touching each button, each light, in a specific order. A show. A demonstration of absolute control. The radio crackled, and then transmitted something that shouldn't be possible. My mother's voice. "Lucas, Lucas, where are you?" Tears instantly filled my eyes. My mother had died 3 years ago. Cancer. I had held her hand in the hospital until the very last second. "No," I whispered. Don't do that. Lucas, I can't find you. It's completely dark here. Please, help me. I covered my ears with my hands, but the voice continued. It wasn't coming from the radio. It was coming from inside my head now. Harris shouted, "Stop it! Whoever you are, stop!" And then, silence. Absolute. The engines were still running, but it seemed as if all sound had been sucked out of the cabin. Not the hum of the instruments, not our breathing, nothing. The silhouette in the reflection stood up. He stood up, and he started walking towards me. I could see her in the glass, approaching step by step, closer and closer. But when I looked directly at where she should have been, nothing, just empty air, until I felt it. A cold hand, so cold it burned, landed on my shoulder. I screamed. I tried to stand up, but the belt held me down. I was trapped there, that cold hand pressing against my shoulder, feeling long fingers sink into the fabric of my uniform. Harris stared at me, terrified, but I knew he wasn't seeing the hand, only my reaction. And then the voice whispered, so close to my ear that I felt the icy air touch my skin. "Thank you for bringing me back." The hand let go. The sounds returned all at once. Roaring engines, crackling radio, my own hysterical breathing, and the autopilot disengaged. Suddenly, he just let go. Harris took control, leveled the plane at 32,000 feet, his hands trembling violently on the control stick. The cold has disappeared. The presence is gone. We stood there, the two of us, in absolute silence, while the plane flew normally again, as if nothing had happened. But something had happened, and I knew, deep down in my soul, that it wasn't over. We landed in Los Angeles at 5:52 a.m. The sun was rising over the runway when we touched down, orange and gold, so normal it seemed obscene, as if the world down below had no idea what had happened up there. Harris didn't say a word during the entire descent, not even during the taxi to the gate, not even when we shut off the engines and real silence finally filled the cabin. He simply took off his headphones, unbuckled his belt, and looked at me with deep, empty eyes. "We're not going to talk about this," she said, her voice slurred, "with anyone. Do you understand?" I understood, because who would believe it? We filled out the technical report together. Temporary communication interference. Possible autopilot system failure. Resolved in flight. Confident words. Words that wouldn't make anyone question our sanity. The FAA opened a routine investigation. They checked the aircraft's systems. Everything was working perfectly. No anomalies were found. No explanation. Case closed. Harris requested medical leave a week later. Stress, they said. Burnout. He was 52 years old, with over 20,000 flight hours. He deserved rest. He never flew again. I tried calling him a few times. He never answered. I heard from a colleague that he moved somewhere in rural Oregon, far from airports, far from the sky. I tried to continue. I went back to flying 2 months later, day shifts first. They told me it was post-incident protocol. But I knew they'd seen something in my psychological report. Fear. Hesitation. Eventually, I went back to night flights, because I needed to prove to myself that I could do it, that it had been an isolated incident, an anomaly. But every time I crossed that area, somewhere over the Midwest, between 32,000 and 37,000 feet, in the dead of night, I feel it. That cold, that presence. Never as strong as that night, but there, always there. As if something had stuck to me, or as if I had left a door open that I can no longer close. Sometimes, when I'm alone in the cabin and the captain goes to use the bathroom, I look at the empty seat next to me, and I swear the leather is slightly pressed, as if someone were sitting there, observing, waiting. It's been 3 months since I stopped checking my reflection in the windows, because every time I looked, I saw the silhouette, always a little clearer, a little more defined. And something happened yesterday that finally made me decide to tell this story. I was on a flight from Chicago to Miami, overnight cruise, normal routine. The captain was new, his first flight with me. A young, enthusiastic guy. He talked too much. Until we stopped over Georgia. He suddenly went quiet. He stopped mid-sentence about his family. He looked at the dashboard, then at me. "Are you feeling that?" she asked, her voice high-pitched. My stomach sank. "Feeling what?" "This. Cold." I saw his breath begin to come out in vapor. I saw the temperature display showing normal. I saw the expression in his eyes change from confusion to fear. And then I heard, coming from the radio, "Co-pilot Mendez, I missed you." The new commander looked at me, terrified. "Did you hear that?" I turned off the radio. I turned everything off. We flew the rest of the journey in absolute silence, with only visual communication and manual controls. When we landed, the captain requested a transfer to short domestic flights. Only during the day. I don't judge him. Because now I know the truth. Whatever it was, that thing didn't stay on that flight. It didn't stay that night. It stayed with me, and it's spreading. Last night, before going to sleep, I checked the black box from that original flight, the flight with Harris. I have access to the files because they never officially closed the investigation. I listened to the audio recordings from the cockpit. All our voices were there, all the regular radio transmissions, all the system alarms. But at the exact moment that presence touched my shoulder, there's another voice, low, distorted, as if it were being played backwards. I ran the recording through analysis software. I reversed the audio, and I heard, clear as crystal, "Now I fly with you, forever." I don't know what's going to happen to me. I don't know if I'll be able to stop flying. It's the only thing I know how to do. But if you work the night shift, tell me where. And if you've been through something similar, you already know what to do.